The reason God matched you with this person will melt your heart. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you. And if you felt that quiet pull in your chest the moment you saw these words, that wasn't curiosity, that was recognition, and your heart needs this right now because something holy has been trying to reach you through memory, through feeling, through the way this person entered your life and changed it without asking permission. And listen closely, because God does not arrange connections casually, He aligns souls with intention, and the reason this person crossed your path goes far deeper than timing, attraction, or coincidence. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you weren't brought together to fill a void, you were brought together to reveal something eternal inside you. And your heart needs this right now because part of you has been questioning the meaning of it all, wondering why it felt so intense, so familiar, so awakening. And listen to this. Truth, intensity doesn't come from chaos when God is involved, it comes from purpose. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God matched you with this person to wake you up gently, to show you what love feels like when it reaches past fear and touches the soul. And your heart needs this right now because you didn't imagine how seen you felt around them, how something softened in you, how old walls didn't stand a chance. And listen carefully, because God often sends people into our lives as mirrors, not to judge us, but to remind us who we really are beneath survival, beneath doubt, beneath old wounds. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason this connection felt different is because it wasn't meant to be consumed, it was meant to be experienced. And your heart needs this right now because experience is how God teaches the heart what words never could. And listen closely, because even the confusion you felt had meaning, even the pauses, the distance, the questions. Because awakening is rarely comfortable at first. And don't scroll, listen to this, because when your spirit is stirred, it doesn't always feel peaceful right away, it feels honest. And your heart needs this right now because honesty has a way of undoing illusions. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to show you that love can be gentle without being weak, deep without being dangerous, real without being forced. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you were meant to feel safe enough to open, and strong enough to not lose yourself. And your heart needs this right now because part of you wonders if you gave too much, felt too much, hoped too much. And listen to this truth, when God is involved, nothing you gave was wasted, it was planted. And don't scroll, listen to this, because seeds don't bloom immediately, they grow underground first. And your heart needs this right now because you've been standing in the quiet season, not realizing roots are forming. And listen closely, because the signs you noticed were not accidents. The 11 moments when you thought of them, the 222 when you questioned the path, the 444 when you felt unexpectedly protected, those were divine confirmations saying, stay present, stay open, this matters. And don't scroll, listen to this, because signs don't always promise outcomes, sometimes they confirm purpose. And your heart needs this right now because purpose is what carries you when clarity hasn't arrived yet. And listen carefully, because God didn't match you with this person to break your heart, He matched you to soften it, to remind you that you are capable of deep, holy love, even after everything you've survived. And don't scroll, listen to this, because survival can make you forget your tenderness. And your heart needs this right now because tenderness is not weakness, it's evidence of faith. And listen closely, because the reason this connection stirred you so deeply is because it touched something sacred, something God has been guarding inside you, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And don't scroll, listen to this, because awakening doesn't always look like fireworks, sometimes it looks like recognition, like, oh, this is what it feels like to be seen, and your heart needs this right now because being seen changes you. It raises your standards, it heals old doubts, it reminds you what you deserve, and listen carefully, because even if the story didn't unfold the way you expected, that does not mean it failed. And don't scroll, listen to this, because success in God's plan is not measured by permanence, it's measured by transformation, and your heart needs this right now because transformation lasts longer than presence. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to show you that love does not have to be chased, begged for, or earned through pain. And don't scroll, listen to this, because once you feel that truth, you can never unfeel it. And your heart needs this right now because that truth will guide every connection. That comes next, and listen carefully, because the reason this will melt your heart is simple and profound. God used this connection to show you yourself, your depth, your capacity, your worth. And don't scroll, listen to this, because when you see yourself clearly, you stop settling, and your heart needs this right now because settling was never your destiny. And listen closely, because this was not about forever, it was about formation, about preparing your heart for something aligned, something reciprocal, something rooted in peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is the signature of God-ordained love, not confusion, not anxiety, not fear. And your heart needs this right now because you are stepping into a season where love will feel steady, not shaky. And listen carefully, because what comes next will not erase what you felt here, it will honor it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not waste connections, He weaves them, and your heart needs this right now to remember that even unanswered questions can be sacred, even endings can be holy. And listen closely, because this was never about losing someone, it was about finding yourself through God's timing, God's wisdom, God's gentle hand guiding your heart. And don't scroll, listen to this final moment carefully, because part 1 ends here with a quiet truth settling into you. The truth that you were matched with this person not to be broken, but to be awakened, not to be emptied, but to be shown what love feels like when it comes from God. And your heart needs this right now because what you felt was real, what you learned was intentional, and what comes next will meet you at the level this connection helped you reach, and that is where destiny continues. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if part 1 stirred something deep and tender inside you, that's because your heart needs this right now, and God is continuing the conversation gently, intentionally, without rushing you. And listen closely, because this part is where understanding begins to replace confusion, where meaning starts to settle into your spirit instead of just your mind. And this message is for you if you've been replaying moments with this person, not out of obsession, but out of wonder, asking yourself why it felt so different, why it touched places nothing else ever reached. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not stir the heart without purpose, and your heart needs this right now because part of you has been afraid that maybe you imagined the depth, maybe you read too much into it, maybe it wasn't as sacred as it felt. And listen to this truth. God does not use illusion to awaken people, He uses truth, and truth is what you felt, even when you didn't understand it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason God matched you with this person was not to give you a fairy tale, it was to give you clarity, clarity about who you are, what you deserve, and how love is meant to feel when it aligns with His design. And your heart needs this right now because clarity often comes wrapped in questions first. And listen carefully, because God knew you wouldn't have believed words alone, you needed to experience love that felt safe, familiar, and divinely timed, even if it didn't last the way you hoped. And don't scroll, listen to this, because lasting is not the same as meaningful, and your heart needs this right now because you've been measuring the connection by its outcome instead of its impact. And listen to this truth: impact is how God measures it. And don't scroll, listen to this. Because God matched you with this person to soften parts of you that had hardened out of necessity, to reopen your trust, to remind you that vulnerability can exist without destruction. And your heart needs this right now because you didn't realize how guarded you had become until this person made you feel safe enough to lower your armor. And listen closely, because God often sends people to heal us in ways we didn't know we needed, not by fixing us, but by reflecting us back to ourselves with gentleness. And don't scroll, listen to this. Because the reflection you saw in their eyes was not about them, it was about you, your light, your depth, your capacity for devotion. And your heart needs this right now because seeing yourself clearly can be overwhelming. And listen carefully, because when God reveals your capacity for love, He also reveals your responsibility to protect it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because protection sometimes looks like letting go, even when love is real. And your heart needs this right now because letting go doesn't mean the connection wasn't divine, it means it served its divine purpose. And listen closely, because the signs you noticed during this connection were not about keeping you attached, they were about keeping you awake. The 11 moments reminding you that alignment was happening within you. The 222 moments reassuring you when you questioned your worth. The 444 moments letting you feel protected even when things felt uncertain. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those signs were God whispering, I'm here, I'm guiding this, trust me. And your heart needs this right now because trusting God with matters of the heart is one of the hardest things we're asked to do. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to show you that love does not have to come with chaos, anxiety, or self-abandonment, even if the ending still hurt. And don't scroll, listen to this, because pain does not cancel holiness. And your heart needs this right now because you've been trying to categorize the connection as either good or bad. And listen to this truth: God's work often lives in the in-between, in experiences that stretch you instead of satisfying you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because stretching is how growth happens. And your heart needs this right now because growth is rarely comfortable, but it is always purposeful. And listen closely, because the reason this will melt your heart is not because of what you lost, but because of what you gained without realizing it: discernment, self-respect, emotional maturity, and a deeper understanding of how God speaks to you through people. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not always answer prayers by giving us what we want. Sometimes He answers by showing us what's possible so we stop settling for less. And your heart needs this right now because this connection raised your standards in a way no sermon or advice ever could. And listen carefully, because even the unanswered questions are part of the lesson, teaching you to trust God without full clarity, to walk by faith instead of outcome. And don't scroll, listen to this, because walking by faith in love is what prepares you for something truly aligned. Something that will not confuse you, drain you, or make you question your worth. And your heart needs this right now because part of you has been afraid that if it didn't work with someone this meaningful, it won't work at all. And listen to this truth: God does not tease hearts, He trains them. And don't scroll, listen to this, because training seasons are not meant to last forever, they are meant to prepare you for what's next. And your heart needs this right now because what's next will meet you at the level this connection helped you reach, not pull you back into old patterns. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to teach you how to love without losing yourself, how to feel deeply without drowning, how to open without abandoning wisdom. and don't scroll, listen to this, because those lessons will carry forward into every future relationship you have. And your heart needs this right now because nothing you felt was wasted, nothing you learned will be lost. And listen carefully, because God does not remove something without replacing it with something greater in understanding, peace, or alignment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because replacement doesn't always mean another person immediately, sometimes it means a stronger version of you first, and your heart needs this right now because that stronger version is emerging quietly, steadily, without forcing anything. And listen closely, because part 2 ends here with a gentle but powerful realization settling in your spirit, the realization that God did not match you with this person to confuse you, but to clarify you, not to break you, but to build you, not to keep you, but to prepare you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because what comes next will not undo what you learned here, it will build upon it, and your heart needs this right now to trust that God's timing in love is not cruel, it is careful, intentional, and always rooted in a plan that honors your heart more than you can see right now. Don't scroll, listen to this message is for you, and if you're here now, your heart needs this right now because this is the moment where the meaning behind everything finally starts to settle, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, in that quiet place where truth lives. And listen closely because God doesn't rush understanding, He lets it arrive when the heart is ready to receive it without breaking. And this message is for you if you've been carrying mixed emotions. Gratitude and grief, peace and confusion, love and release. All at the same time, wondering how something can feel so sacred and still not stay the way you hoped. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that tension is not failure, it's formation, and your heart needs this right now because formation happens in layers, not all at once. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to teach you something that could only be learned through experience, not advice, not warning, not prayer alone, but lived moments that reached your soul and rewired your understanding of love. And don't scroll, listen to this, because part of you has been trying to make sense of why it unfolded the way it did, replaying conversations, timing, what-ifs. And listen to this truth, clarity does not come from replaying, it comes from receiving, and your heart needs this right now because God is not asking you to analyze the connection anymore, He's asking you to integrate what it gave you. And listen closely, because integration is where lessons become wisdom, and wisdom is what stays long after the person is no longer present in the same way. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God used this connection to show you the difference between attachment and alignment, between chemistry and covenant, between longing and peace. And your heart needs this right now because before this, you may have confused intensity for depth, urgency for passion, and uncertainty for destiny. And listen carefully, because God does not build destiny on anxiety, He builds it on peace, even when the journey toward peace is uncomfortable. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the discomfort you felt wasn't punishment, it was refinement. And your heart needs this right now because refinement feels like loss before it feels like strength. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to refine your discernment, to sharpen your intuition, to help you recognize when love is drawing you closer to Him versus pulling you away from yourself. And don't scroll, listen to this, because self-abandonment is never required in God-ordained love. And your heart needs this right now because you've abandoned yourself before trying to keep connections alive. And listen to this truth, this connection was meant to show you that you don't have to disappear to be loved. And don't scroll, listen to this, because even if it ended, the way you were able to show up as yourself was the miracle, not the duration. and your heart needs this right now, because miracles don't always look like permanence, sometimes they look like revelation. And listen carefully, because God revealed your capacity for emotional honesty, vulnerability, and spiritual connection through this person, and that revelation cannot be taken from you, no matter how the story changed. And don't scroll, listen to this, because what God reveals, He protects. And your heart needs this right now, because part of you fears that letting go means losing access to that depth again. And listen to this truth: once God awakens something in you, it does not go dormant again, it becomes part of who you are. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the signs you noticed during this connection, those moments of 11:11 when you felt aligned, 222 when you questioned whether you were doing the right thing, 444 when you felt protected even in uncertainty, were not there to promise permanence, they were there to confirm purpose. And your heart needs this right now, because purpose carries meaning even when outcomes change. And listen closely, because God never promised that every divine connection would stay forever, but He did promise that every divine connection would serve you, shape you, and draw you closer to truth. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason this will melt your heart is not because of what you lost, but because of what God spared you from by not letting it continue beyond its assignment. And your heart needs this right now, because staying too long in a lesson can turn growth into stagnation. And listen carefully, because God knows when to release people before love turns into compromise. And don't scroll, listen to this, because protection sometimes comes disguised as endings. And your heart needs this right now, because you've been interpreting the ending as rejection, when it was actually redirection. And listen to this truth: redirection is mercy. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God matched you with this person to teach you how to recognize mercy even when it hurts. And your heart needs this right now, because mercy doesn't always feel gentle in the moment, but it feels peaceful later. And listen closely, because the peace you're slowly finding is the confirmation that God's hand was in this the entire time. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is the fruit of alignment, not explanation. And your heart needs this right now, because you've been craving explanation, and God is offering you peace instead. And listen carefully, because peace lasts longer than answers. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the connection you shared was not meant to be your destination, it was meant to be your instruction, showing you what love feels like when it touches the soul. And your heart needs this right now, because once you feel that, you can no longer pretend to be satisfied with anything less. And listen closely, because God is raising your standard not to make love harder to find, but to make it safer when it arrives. And don't scroll, listen to this, because safety is the hallmark of God-ordained love, not confusion, not fear, not constant self-doubt. And your heart needs this right now, because you're entering a season where love will feel steadier, clearer, and more rooted in mutual presence. And listen carefully, because what comes next will not require you to prove your worth, perform your value, or sacrifice your peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not test hearts by breaking them repeatedly, He trains them through moments of recognition and release. And your heart needs this right now, because release is not failure, it is obedience to growth. And listen closely, because obedience to growth is how destiny unfolds, quietly, intentionally, and without regret. And don't scroll, listen to this, because part 3 ends here with a truth settling gently but firmly inside you, the truth that God matched you with this person not to keep you stuck in longing, but to free you into clarity, strength, and deeper trust in His plan. And your heart needs this right now, because trusting God with your heart is not about understanding every step, it's about believing that every step is shaping you for something aligned, something peaceful, something that will not confuse you, and what comes next will not erase what you felt here. It will honor it by meeting you with love that feels familiar, not because it hurts, but because it finally feels like home. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if you're still here, your heart needs this right now, because this is where the meaning becomes personal in a way that can no longer be ignored, where what God was doing behind the scenes starts to feel undeniable in your body, not just understandable in your mind. And listen closely, because this part is about why it had to be them, not just anyone, not just another face, not just another chapter, but this specific person with this specific energy at this specific moment in your life. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God is precise when He works through connection, and your heart needs this right now, because you've been asking quietly, sometimes out loud, why them, God? And listen to this truth: God matched you with this person because they could reach places in you that others couldn't, not because they were perfect, but because they were positioned to awaken something dormant, something waiting, something holy. And don't scroll, listen to this, because awakening rarely feels gentle at first. It feels disorienting, like something familiar and unfamiliar colliding. And your heart needs this right now, because you felt that collision, the way your soul recognized something before your mind could explain it, the way being around them made you feel more yourself and more exposed at the same time. And listen carefully, because God often uses people to pull us out of emotional autopilot, to interrupt patterns we didn't even know we were repeating. And don't scroll, listen to this, because this person interrupted your patterns, the pattern of settling, the pattern of emotional self-protection, the pattern of loving halfway to avoid being hurt fully. And your heart needs this right now, because you didn't realize how much you were holding back until you felt what it was like to open, even briefly. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to show you the contrast between connection that merely passes time and connection that changes you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because contrast is one of God's favorite teachers, and your heart needs this right now, because before this, you may have accepted inconsistency as normal, confusion as chemistry, longing as love. And listen to this truth: God disrupted that by letting you taste clarity, even if it didn't stay as long as you wanted. And don't scroll, listen to this, because tasting clarity once is enough to ruin the appetite for chaos forever. And your heart needs this right now, because you are no longer the same person who entered that connection. And listen carefully, because that transformation is not an accident, it's the assignment being fulfilled. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God doesn't always keep people in our lives after the lesson has been delivered, not because the love wasn't real, but because the lesson was complete. And your heart needs this right now, because you've been equating completion with failure. And listen to this truth: completion is success in God's economy. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason this will melt your heart is not because of what could have been, but because of what God protected you from by not letting it continue beyond alignment. And your heart needs this right now, because staying too long can turn a blessing into a burden. And listen closely, because God loves you too much to let that happen. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the angel numbers you noticed during this time were not meant to keep you attached, they were meant to keep you anchored. 11. 11 reminding you that God was aligning your inner world, not just your circumstances. 222 appearing when you felt torn, reminding you that balance was being restored. 444 showing up when fear crept in, reminding you that you were protected even when things felt uncertain. And don't scroll, listen to this, because protection doesn't always look like comfort. sometimes it looks like restraint, redirection, or unanswered prayers, and your heart needs this right now because unanswered prayers can feel like rejection when they are actually redirection towards something safer, healthier, more reciprocal. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to recalibrate your sense of worth, to show you that you are capable of being desired without chasing, valued without performing, and loved without losing yourself. And don't scroll, listen to this, because once that recalibration happens, you cannot unlearn it. And your heart needs this right now because unlearning old beliefs about love is painful, but necessary. And listen closely, because God also matched you with this person to reveal areas where you still needed healing, not to shame you, but to prepare you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because preparation is an act of love. And your heart needs this right now because you are being prepared for something that requires you to stand in truth, not longing, in peace, not anxiety, in mutual effort, not imbalance. And listen carefully, because the discomfort you felt when things didn't align was your intuition strengthening, not failing. And don't scroll, listen to this, because intuition often speaks through discomfort before it speaks through clarity. And your heart needs this right now because you listened, even when it hurt, even when it cost you something. And listen to this truth: obedience to your intuition is obedience to God's guidance within you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that obedience is what will bless your future connections. And your heart needs this right now because the future you're stepping into requires discernment, not desperation. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to move you out of desperation and into discernment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because discernment changes everything. It changes who you're attracted to, what you tolerate, how long you stay, and how deeply you trust yourself. And your heart needs this right now because trusting yourself again is one of the greatest gifts God can give you. And listen carefully, because this connection was not meant to be your forever, it was meant to be your foundation. The moment you realized love can be safe, meaningful, and God-centered. And don't scroll, listen to this, because once that foundation is laid, God can build something lasting on top of it. And your heart needs this right now because you are no longer building from wounds. You are building from wisdom. And listen closely, because wisdom does not rush love, it recognizes it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because recognition feels calm, steady, familiar in a holy way, not anxious or urgent. And your heart needs this right now because God is guiding you toward love that feels like peace, not pressure. And listen carefully, because peace is the clearest sign of God's involvement. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the peace you're beginning to feel now is not because you lost something, it's because you gained clarity. And your heart needs this right now because clarity heals faster than explanations ever could. And listen closely, because this was never about losing a person, it was about gaining a deeper relationship with yourself and with God's voice in your life. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God speaks most clearly when the heart is quiet enough to listen. And your heart needs this right now because you're finally quiet enough, open enough, healed enough to hear Him say, "Trust me, I was in this. And I'm still guiding you." And listen carefully, because what comes next will not erase what you felt here, it will honor it by meeting you with a love that doesn't confuse you, doesn't drain you, doesn't require you to question your worth. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not awaken hearts just to abandon them, He awakens them to prepare them. And your heart needs this right now because preparation means something beautiful is ahead, something aligned, something steady. Something that will feel familiar not because it hurts, but because it finally reflects the peace God has been cultivating inside you all along. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if you're still here, your heart needs this right now, because this is the moment where God gently asks you to look back, not in regret, not in longing, but in recognition. Recognition of how far you've come and how intentionally every step was guided, even the painful ones, and listen closely, because this part is about why your heart had to feel that deeply, why God allowed you to care so much, hope so hard, and open so fully. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God never awakens love in a heart without purpose, and your heart needs this right now, because you've wondered if loving that deeply was a mistake, if you exposed yourself too much, if you believed too hard. And listen to this truth: loving deeply was never your mistake, it was your assignment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God matched you with this person to awaken your capacity, not to exhaust it, to show you how much love you are capable of giving and receiving when fear is not in the driver's seat. And your heart needs this right now, because before this connection, you may have loved cautiously, guardedly, half open to protect yourself. And listen carefully, because God knew you needed an experience that would gently but firmly prove to you that your heart is not broken, not too much, not naive, but strong, resilient, and divinely designed to love well. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason it hurt when it didn't last the way you hoped is not because it was wrong, but because it was real, and real things leave an imprint. And your heart needs this right now, because you've been trying to minimize the impact to avoid the ache. And listen to this truth: minimizing the impact also minimizes the miracle. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the miracle was not the relationship itself, it was the awakening that happened inside you, the way you became more honest, more present, more aligned with your values and boundaries. And your heart needs this right now, because those changes didn't happen by accident, they were cultivated. And listen closely, because God matched you with this person to teach you how to listen to your intuition without ignoring your heart, how to feel deeply without abandoning wisdom, how to open without losing yourself. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those lessons are rare and priceless. And your heart needs this right now, because they will protect you for the rest of your life. And listen carefully, because the angel numbers you noticed, those moments of 1111 when you felt aligned, 222 when you questioned whether you should keep going, 444 when you felt held even in uncertainty, were not there to promise permanence, they were there to promise presence, God's presence with you as you learned, stretched, and grew. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God never leaves you alone in lessons that touch the heart. And your heart needs this right now, because you may have felt alone at times, misunderstood, unsure, but you were never unaccompanied. And listen closely, because the reason this connection had to end, or change form, was not because you failed, but because you passed. You learned what you were meant to learn, you saw what you were meant to see, and you reached the level of awareness God needed you to reach before moving forward. And don't scroll, listen to this, because staying past the lesson would have required compromise, and God does not grow His children through compromise, He grows them through clarity. And your heart needs this right now, because clarity can feel empty at first when you're used to intensity. And listen to this truth: emptiness is just space waiting to be filled with something aligned. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God clears space intentionally. And your heart needs this right now, because space is where healthier love can land, love that doesn't confuse you, doesn't drain you, doesn't require you to interpret silence or overanalyze words. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to reset your nervous system, to show you that love can Feel calm even when it's deep. That attraction doesn't have to come with anxiety. That connection doesn't have to hurt to be meaningful. And don't scroll, listen to this, because once your nervous system learns that, it will never settle for chaos again, and your heart needs this right now because that reset is one of the greatest gifts God can give. And listen closely, because the tenderness you feel now when you think about this connection is not weakness, it's evidence that your heart is still open, still soft, still capable of love after disappointment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because many people close their hearts after experiences like this, but you didn't. You processed, reflected, and stayed open, and your heart needs this right now because that openness is sacred. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to show you that your heart can survive loving deeply. That it doesn't shatter when things don't work out, it transforms. And don't scroll, listen to this, because transformation is what God is after, not comfort, not convenience, but growth that brings you closer to who He created you to be. And your heart needs this right now because growth is often mistaken for loss when you're in it. And listen to this truth, what you lost was not love, it was illusion. And don't scroll, listen to this, because illusion kept you hoping for something that wasn't fully aligned. And your heart needs this right now because alignment feels quieter, steadier, and sometimes less dramatic than what you imagined love would be. And listen closely, because God is teaching you that drama is not depth, peace is. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is what your soul has been craving all along, even when your emotions were drawn to intensity. And your heart needs this right now because cravings change when healing happens. And listen carefully, because healing doesn't erase desire. It refines it, it teaches you what to want and what to walk away from. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God matched you with this person to refine your desires, to help you recognize love that is safe, reciprocal, and God-centered. And your heart needs this right now because the next connection you experience will feel different, calmer, more mutual, more grounded. And listen closely, because that difference is not because the magic is gone. It's because wisdom has entered the room. And don't scroll, listen to this, because wisdom doesn't kill romance, it stabilizes it. And your heart needs this right now because stability used to feel boring to you, and now it feels like relief. And listen carefully, because relief is how your soul tells you you're on the right path. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not lead His children into confusion and call it love. He leads them into clarity and calls it peace. And your heart needs this right now because peace is becoming your new standard. And listen closely, because the reason this connection will melt your heart in hindsight is because you'll see how perfectly it prepared you, how gently it redirected you, how intentionally it raised your awareness. And don't scroll, listen to this, because one day you'll look back and realize that if it had stayed longer, you might not have been ready for what God has planned next. And your heart needs this right now because trusting God's timing in matters of the heart is one of the hardest acts of faith. And listen carefully, because faith doesn't always feel confident. Sometimes it feels like choosing peace without proof. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you are doing that now, even if it doesn't feel heroic. And your heart needs this right now because quiet faith is still faith. And listen closely, because God is not finished with your story, He is simply turning the page. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the love that comes next will not erase what you learned here, it will build on it, honor it, and reflect it back to you in a way that feels familiar, not because it hurts, but because it finally feels like truth. And your heart needs this right now because truth is what sets the heart free. And this connection, in all its beauty and ache, was part of God's way of doing exactly that. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if you've reached this point, your heart needs this right now, because this is where everything God has been doing behind the curtain begins to make sense, not all at once, not intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually, in the place where peace finally starts to outweigh confusion. And listen closely, because this part is about trust. The kind of trust that doesn't come from answers but from alignment, and this message is for you if you've noticed that the ache has softened, that the questions don't sting the way they used to, that something inside you feels steadier even without closure. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that steadiness is not accidental. It's the result of God slowly recentering your heart on Him instead of outcomes. And your heart needs this right now because you've spent so long asking God why that you didn't realize He was teaching you how to trust Him with what you love most, how to release without resentment, how to hold faith even when the story doesn't go the way you imagined. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to bring you to this exact place, the place where your faith becomes personal instead of theoretical, where you stop believing in love as an idea and start trusting God as a guide. And don't scroll, listen to this, because trusting God with your heart is one of the bravest spiritual acts there is. And your heart needs this right now, because bravery doesn't always look like confidence. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace when your emotions want answers. And listen closely, because God has been teaching you that peace is not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of trust. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason you're able to breathe a little easier now is because your heart is no longer fighting God's timing. It's learning to rest in it. And your heart needs this right now, because rest does not come easily to those who love deeply. And listen carefully, because God knew your heart would need proof that resting would not mean losing everything you care about, and that's why He let you experience love that felt real, sacred, and awakening, even if it didn't last in the form you expected. And don't scroll, listen to this, because once you experience love that feels God-touched, you stop doubting whether God cares about your heart at all. And your heart needs this right now, because doubt has been heavy for you. And listen closely, because God is now shifting your focus from the person to the process, from what you lost to what you gained, from longing to learning. And don't scroll, listen to this, because learning is what remains when people leave. And your heart needs this right now, because what you learned here will guide every decision you make going forward. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to teach you how to surrender control without surrendering self-respect, how to love without clinging, how to hope without idolizing outcomes. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those lessons are rare and powerful. And your heart needs this right now, because they protect you from repeating cycles that once drained you. And listen closely, because you may notice now that your prayers have changed. They're less about, bring them back, and more about, bring me peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that shift is spiritual maturity. And your heart needs this right now, because maturity doesn't come from getting everything you want. It comes from trusting God even when you don't. And listen carefully, because God never intended for this connection to replace Him. It was meant to draw you closer to Him, closer to His voice, His timing, His way of loving you through people without making people your source. And don't scroll, listen to this, because making people the source is how hearts get broken beyond necessity. And your heart needs this right now, because God is gently repositioning Himself as your foundation. And listen closely, because when God is your foundation, connections become blessings instead of lifelines. And don't scroll, listen to this, because blessings can be released without devastation. And your heart needs this right now, because devastation has taught you more than enough already. And listen carefully, because the peace you're beginning to feel is not because you stopped caring, it's because you stopped resisting what God has been trying to do for you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because resistance often looks like attachment to a specific outcome, and your heart needs this right now because God's plans for you are broader, deeper, and safer than any single outcome you can imagine. And listen closely, because safety is what God is prioritizing now. Emotional safety, spiritual safety, relational safety. And don't scroll, listen to this, because safety doesn't mean boring, it means sustainable, and your heart needs this right now because sustainability is how love lasts. And listen carefully, because God matched you with this person to heal the part of you that thought love had to hurt to be real, that intensity was proof of depth, that longing was romantic. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God is correcting that belief gently, through experience instead of condemnation, and your heart needs this right now. Because beliefs formed through pain must be healed through love. And listen closely, because the love you experienced, even briefly, was enough to show you a different standard, a higher one. And don't scroll, listen to this, because higher standards are not barriers, they are protections. And your heart needs this right now because protection is what allows your heart to stay open without being wounded repeatedly. And listen carefully, because God is not asking you to close your heart, He's teaching you how to guard it wisely. And don't scroll, listen to this, because guarding your heart does not mean mistrust, it means discernment. And your heart needs this right now because discernment is what allows you to love freely without fear. And listen closely, because fear has been loosening its grip on you lately. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that's not coincidence, it's the result of choosing faith over fixation. And your heart needs this right now because fixation kept you stuck in what might have been, and faith is carrying you into what will be. And listen carefully, because what will be does not require you to diminish yourself, explain your worth, or tolerate confusion. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not lead His children into relationships that steal their peace, He leads them into connections that reflect His character. And your heart needs this right now because your understanding of God's character in love has deepened. And listen closely, because deepening faith changes how you love, how you wait, how you let go. And don't scroll, listen to this, because letting go no longer feels like falling for you, it feels like being caught. And your heart needs this right now because being caught by God's plan is safer than holding on to anything He's asking you to release. And listen carefully, because this is where trust becomes embodied, not just spoken, where you stop saying, "I trust God," and start living like you do. And don't scroll, listen to this, because living trust looks like choosing peace when the past calls, choosing clarity when nostalgia tempts, choosing alignment when old patterns knock. And your heart needs this right now because you are doing that, even if it feels quiet and unseen. And listen closely, because God sees it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because part 6 is not about closure, it's about confidence, confidence that God was in this, God is still with you, and God is leading you somewhere that will not undo the healing He's done. And your heart needs this right now because healing is sacred. And listen carefully, because nothing God heals, He intends to break again. And don't scroll, listen to this, because what comes next will not demand the same tears, the same confusion, the same self-doubt. It will meet you with steadiness, mutuality, and peace. And your heart needs this right now because peace is no longer just something you want, it's something you're becoming. And listen closely, because becoming peaceful changes everything. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God did not match You with this person to leave you empty-handed, he matched you to bring you here, to this place of trust, clarity, and quiet strength, and your heart needs this right now to know that this is not the end of the story, it's the moment you finally stopped fighting the author and started trusting the plot, and what comes next will unfold not with chaos, but with confirmation, not with anxiety, but with assurance, and not with confusion, but with love that feels like rest.